Welcome to English Story Avenue, the home of powerful English stories, life lessons, brain mysteries, emotional journeys, and motivational storytelling. Every story here is created to inspire your mind, improve your English, and take you into a different world of imagination. If you love amazing stories with deep meanings, then you're in the right place. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to English Story Avenue and turn on the bell icon for more incredible stories every day. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the story. Your brain is a supercomputer. The boy who thought he was ordinary, Ayaan, always believed he was an average boy. He lived in a small town where nothing exciting ever happened. Every morning he woke up at 6:30, dragged himself out of bed, wore the same wrinkled school uniform, and walked to school through dusty streets filled with bicycle bells and shouting shopkeepers. His teachers thought he was quiet. His classmates thought he was weird. And honestly, Ayaan thought the same thing about himself. He wasn't the smartest student in class. He wasn't the fastest runner. He wasn't popular. Whenever students answered difficult questions in class, he stayed silent. Whenever there was a competition, he avoided participating. Deep inside, he believed one thing: I'm not special. But Ayaan had no idea that inside his head existed the most powerful machine on earth, a machine greater than any robot, more advanced than any phone, faster than the world's biggest computers. His brain. And one ordinary Tuesday changed everything. That day began badly. Ayaan forgot his homework. Again, his math teacher, Mr. Hamid, removed his glasses and stared at him in disappointment. Ayaan, he said, you have potential, but you never use your mind properly. The entire class laughed. Ayaan lowered his head. After school, he walked home slowly while kicking tiny stones on the road. Potential, he whispered sarcastically. Everyone says that. Nobody means it. When he reached home, the electricity was gone again. His younger brother was crying because of the heat, and his mother looked exhausted. Ayaan, can you bring water from the shop? She asked softly. Without replying, he picked up the bottles and left. The evening sky was orange. The air smelled of dust and rain. As he walked toward the shop, he noticed an old bookstore he had never seen open before. A faded board hung above the door. Mind and Memory Library. The lights inside flickered strangely. Curious, Ayaan stepped in. The store smelled like old paper and wood polish. Thousands of books covered the shelves from floor to ceiling. And behind the counter sat an old man with silver hair and sharp eyes. You're late, the old man said calmly. Ayaan blinked. Late for what? For discovering who you really are. Ayaan frowned. I think you're confusing me with someone else. The old man smiled. No, I've been waiting for you. Ayaan felt uncomfortable. He slowly backed toward the door. Relax, the old man laughed. I'm not crazy. That didn't help. My name is Professor Kareem, he continued. And you, young man, have spent your entire life using less than what your brain can truly do. Ayaan crossed his arms. Everyone says stuff like that, because it's true. The professor stood up and walked toward a shelf. He pulled out a dusty black book. You see this? He asked. Ayaan nodded. This book contains more than 900 pages. Yet your brain can store information equal to millions of books. Ayaan rolled his eyes slightly. Sure. The professor suddenly asked, What did you eat 3 Thursdays ago? Ayaan frowned. I don't know. Exactly. Your brain stores the memory, but you don't know how to access it. He pointed toward Ayaan's forehead. Inside your skull lives a biological supercomputer. It processes images, emotions, sounds, memories, and decisions faster than the most advanced machines humans have ever built. Ayaan stayed silent. The professor continued. Do you know why some people become extraordinary? They're born smart? No, the professor said firmly. They train their minds differently. Something about his voice felt real. Not motivational. Not fake. Real. The professor opened the black book. Inside was a single sentence. Your brain becomes what you feed it. Ayaan stared at the words. What does that mean? It means, the professor said, if you fill your mind with fear, laziness, and doubt, your brain becomes weak. He turned the page. But if you feed it focus, learning, imagination, and discipline, another sentence appeared. It becomes unstoppable. That night, Ayaan couldn't sleep. The professor's words echoed in his mind. Your brain becomes what you feed it. For the first time in years, he started thinking differently. What if he wasn't stupid? What if he had simply trained his brain the wrong way? The next morning, something unusual happened. Instead of scrolling endlessly on his phone after waking up, he sat quietly for 5 minutes, just thinking. At school, he listened carefully during class instead of daydreaming. And something strange happened. He understood the lesson faster than usual. Not perfectly, but better. When Mr. Hamid asked a question, Ayaan slowly raised his hand. The class became silent. Even the teacher looked surprised. Ayaan answered correctly. Not completely correctly, but enough. Good, Mr. Hamid said with genuine surprise. Ayaan felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Confidence. Tiny, weak, but real. Days passed. Ayaan returned to the bookstore every evening. Professor Karim taught him strange things about the brain. How memories connect, how habits shape intelligence, how attention works like mental energy. One evening, the professor placed 2 glasses on the table. One contained clean water. The other was muddy. Your brain is like water, he explained. When your mind is full of noise, distractions, fear, and overthinking, you cannot see clearly. He shook the muddy glass. But when you calm your thoughts, the mud slowly settled. Everything becomes clearer. Ayaan watched carefully. No school teaches this, he whispered. The professor smiled sadly. Most people spend their entire lives without understanding the machine inside their own heads. Weeks later, Ayaan changed in ways nobody expected. He started remembering lessons faster. He focused longer. His grades improved. Even his posture changed. His friends noticed it too. What happened to you? One classmate asked. Nothing, Ayaan replied. But deep inside he knew. Everything was changing. One afternoon, Professor Karim gave him a challenge. For the next 7 days, he said, watch every thought that enters your mind. That sounds impossible. Exactly. Your brain is always being programmed. Most people never notice the programming. Ayaan tried it, and he became shocked. His mind constantly repeated negative thoughts. I'll fail. I'm not smart. I can't do this. The professor explained. Every repeated thought becomes a command to your brain. So my brain believes whatever I repeat? Yes, whether it helps you or destroys you. That sentence hit Ayaan hard, because for years he had been insulting himself inside his own mind. No wonder he felt weak. One rainy evening, Ayaan entered the bookstore and found the professor staring at an old photograph. In the picture, a younger Professor Karim stood beside scientists in a large laboratory. You were a scientist? Ayaan asked. The professor nodded slowly. Many years ago. What happened? The old man sighed deeply. We built machines trying to copy human intelligence. Like AI. Yes, but eventually I realized something. What? No machine could fully match the human brain. He pointed at Ayaan, especially a trained one. Ayaan sat quietly. The professor continued. The brain can adapt, heal, imagine, dream, solve problems, create art, feel emotions, and make impossible decisions within seconds. He smiled faintly. Humans carry universes inside their heads. Months passed. Ayaan became one of the best students in class. But something more important changed too. He no longer hated himself. He stopped comparing himself to others. Instead of saying, "I'm dumb," he began asking, "How can I improve?" That single change transformed everything. One day, the school announced a national science competition. Students from across the country would participate. The winner would receive a scholarship. Everyone expected the school topper, Saad, to win. Nobody expected Ayaan to even participate. But he wrote his name anyway. The class laughed. "Ayaan?" Someone whispered. "He'll embarrass himself." For a moment, old fears returned. But that evening, Professor Karim told him something unforgettable. Fear is normal. But your brain listens to repetition more than fear. What does that mean? If you repeatedly act bravely, your brain slowly becomes brave. Ayaan worked harder than ever before. He studied late into the night. He practiced speaking confidently. He trained his memory. Sometimes he failed. Sometimes he forgot everything during practice. Sometimes he wanted to quit. But he kept going. Because for the first time in his life, he believed growth was possible. Competition day arrived. The hall was enormous. Bright lights hung from the ceiling. Students from elite schools sat confidently with laptops and expensive equipment. Ayaan suddenly felt small again. Very small. What am I doing here? He thought. His hands trembled. Then he remembered the professor's words. Your brain becomes what you feed it. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and stepped forward. The competition had 3 rounds. The first tested memory. The second tested problem solving. The third tested creativity. Ayaan shocked everyone by reaching the final round. Even he couldn't believe it. During the creativity challenge, students were asked, "What is humanity's greatest hidden power?" Most students talked about technology. Some talked about money. Others talked about science. When Ayaan's turn came, he stood silently for a few seconds. Then he spoke. Humanity's greatest hidden power is the brain. The audience listened carefully. We carry the world's most advanced supercomputer inside our heads, he continued. But most people spend their lives believing they are weak. His voice grew stronger. The human brain changes according to thoughts, habits, focus, and belief. A person who trains the mind can completely transform their life. The hall became silent. Ayaan looked around. We are not limited by our brains, he said softly. We are limited by how little we understand them. The judges stared at him in surprise. And for the first time in his life, Ayaan saw people listening to him seriously, not laughing, not judging, listening. When the results were announced, the hall erupted with applause. Ayaan had won 2nd place nationally. 2nd place? The boy who once believed he was ordinary. Tears filled his eyes. He immediately ran to the bookstore to tell Professor Karim. But when he arrived, the store was empty. Dust covered the shelves. The lights were off. Confused, Ayaan looked around. A nearby shopkeeper noticed him. Looking for someone? Yes, Ayaan replied. The old professor who owns this bookstore. The man looked confused. This shop has been abandoned for years. A cold chill ran through Ayaan's body. What? No one's been here in a very long time. Ayaan stared through the dusty window. On the wooden counter sat the black book. Nothing else. Hands shaking, he entered the silent shop. The air felt colder than before. He slowly opened the book. Inside, on the final page, were handwritten words. The greatest technology on Earth has always been the human mind. Below it was one final sentence. Now help others discover theirs. Years later, Ayaan became a neuroscientist and teacher. But unlike others, he never taught students they were naturally smart or naturally dumb. He taught them something far more powerful. Brains grow. Minds adapt. Humans evolve. And the thoughts we repeat shape the people we become. Whenever students doubted themselves, he smiled and told them, "Your brain is a supercomputer." Most laughed at first, just like he once did. But then he would continue, "And you haven't even discovered half of what it can do yet."